The Silent Sister: How One Weaver Became the Invisible Death of the Vietnamese Jungle. Welcome back to Hidden Vietnam History, where we uncover the extraordinary stories of individuals whose innovations changed the nature of warfare forever. Tonight we're exploring the remarkable journey of a Vietnamese textile worker who revolutionized military camouflage and became one of the most feared snipers in the Vietnam conflict. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button for more incredible stories of innovation born from the crucible of war. Like this video if you want to discover how ancient weaving techniques were transformed into cutting-edge military technology that's still used by special forces today. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with our global community of military history enthusiasts. Now prepare yourself, because tonight we're meeting Vo Thi Sao, the Silent Sister, the woman who turned traditional Vietnamese fabric arts into the world's first jungle-specific ghillie suit, and used her revolutionary camouflage to achieve 89 confirmed kills while remaining completely invisible to enemy forces. Chapter 1: The Weaver's Daughter. Vo Thi Sao was born in 1944 in the village of Duc Pho, located in the mountainous region of Quang Ngai Province. Her childhood was spent among the looms and dyes of her family's textile workshop, where for generations the Vo family had created some of the most prized fabrics in central Vietnam. The Vo family specialized in creating textiles that mimicked the natural world. Their techniques, passed down through 7 generations, involved intricate dyeing processes that could replicate the exact colors of jungle foliage, bark textures, and even the play of sunlight through leaves. These fabrics were traditionally used for ceremonial garments and theater costumes that required perfect visual illusions. Sao learned these ancient techniques from her grandmother, Vo Thi Lan, who was considered a master artisan whose skills bordered on the supernatural. Grandmother Lan could create fabrics that seemed to shift and change color depending on the angle of view, that appeared to move and breathe like living vegetation, and that could make the wearer virtually invisible against certain backgrounds. But these weren't just artistic techniques. They were based on sophisticated understanding of color theory, light reflection, and human visual perception that had been developed over centuries of refinement. Sao showed exceptional talent for textile work from an early age, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of how colors and patterns interacted with natural environments. By age 16, she could create fabrics that were indistinguishable from living foliage even at close range. Her life changed forever in 1963, when American forces began conducting search and destroy operations in Quang Ngai Province. During one of these operations, Sao's village was identified as a suspected Viet Cong stronghold and was subjected to intensive bombardment and ground assault. Sao's family workshop was destroyed in the attack, and her grandmother was killed when the building collapsed. But more devastating was the loss of centuries of accumulated knowledge. The techniques and patterns that had been carefully preserved through generations of master weavers were lost when the workshop's archives were burned. Sao survived the attack by hiding in the jungle for 3 days, using pieces of her family's fabrics to remain concealed from American patrols. The experience taught her that her ancestral skills could be more than artistic tradition. They could be weapons of war. Chapter 2: The Art of Invisibility. After the destruction of her village, Sao joined the local Viet Cong unit and volunteered for sniper training. But her instructors quickly realized that her value lay not just in marksmanship, but in her unique understanding of camouflage and concealment. Traditional military camouflage of the 1960s was designed for European environments and was largely ineffective in the dense, multi-layered vegetation of Vietnamese jungles. American and South Vietnamese forces relied on standard-issue camouflage patterns that stood out clearly against tropical foliage, making them easy targets for enemy snipers. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces had better local camouflage, but even their techniques were crude compared to what Sao could achieve using her family's textile methods. Sao began experimenting with applying traditional weaving techniques to military camouflage. Instead of simply copying existing patterns, she studied the specific environments where she would be operating and created custom camouflage that was precisely calibrated to those locations. Her first innovation was understanding that effective jungle camouflage required multiple layers of visual deception: the canopy level, understory, and ground level,
All had different color palettes and light conditions that changed throughout the day. Effective concealment required camouflage that could work across all these environmental variations. Sao developed a technique she called living weaving, creating camouflage that incorporated actual vegetation into the fabric structure. Instead of simply painting or dyeing fabric to look like leaves, she wove real leaves, bark, and other organic materials into the textile in patterns that maintained the natural appearance while providing the durability needed for military use. But her breakthrough innovation was understanding how human vision works in jungle environments. She realized that American soldiers were primarily trained to spot movement and obvious visual contrasts, but they were poor at detecting subtle pattern disruptions that didn't trigger their trained recognition responses. Sao's camouflage was designed to exploit these perceptual limitations. Her patterns broke up the human silhouette in ways that confused the eye without creating obvious artificial shapes. The result was camouflage that made the wearer effectively invisible even when moving in broad daylight. Chapter 3. The First Ghillie Suit. Sao's masterpiece was the creation of what would later be recognized as the world's first jungle-specific ghillie suit. Unlike traditional ghillie suits that were designed for grassland and scrub environments, Sao's creation was specifically engineered for the three-dimensional complexity of tropical jungle. The suit took 3 months to complete and required materials that Sao had to gather from across Quang Ngai province. She used traditional Vietnamese silk as the base fabric but modified the weaving pattern to create a three-dimensional structure that could hold organic materials while maintaining flexibility and durability. The dyeing process involved 17 different natural pigments that Sao extracted from jungle plants, each calibrated to reproduce specific aspects of jungle coloration. But the key innovation was a technique Sao called seasonal adaptation. The suit could be modified to match the changing colors of jungle vegetation throughout the year. Sao incorporated living moss into the fabric structure, creating patches of actual living vegetation that would grow and change naturally, ensuring that the camouflage remained current with environmental change. She also used techniques from traditional Vietnamese puppet theater to create fabric elements that would move naturally in wind, mimicking the motion of real foliage. But the most sophisticated aspect of Sao's ghillie suit was its integration with the wearer's movement pattern. Sao studied how animals moved through jungle environments without detection and incorporated these lessons into the suit's design. The fabric was weighted and structured to encourage natural movement that matched jungle wildlife behavior.
The finished suit made Sao virtually invisible in jungle environments. She could remain motionless for hours within meters of enemy positions without detection, or move through dense vegetation without creating any visual disturbance that would alert observers. Field tests of the suit exceeded all expectations. Sao could position herself within 20 meters of American camps without being spotted by sentries who were specifically watching for enemy infiltration. She could move along trails in daylight while American patrols passed within arm's reach without seeing her. Chapter 4. The Hunting Ground. Sao's first operational deployment with her revolutionary camouflage came in August 1965, when she was assigned to eliminate a team of American advisors who were training South Vietnamese forces in counter-sniper techniques near Da Nang. The mission was considered nearly impossible using conventional sniper tactics. The American advisors had established their training facility in an area with excellent fields of fire and clear sight lines that eliminated most concealment opportunities. They were protected by South Vietnamese forces who had been specifically trained in anti-sniper procedures. But Sao's ghillie suit allowed her to approach the facility using tactics that would have been suicidal for conventionally camouflaged snipers. She positioned herself within 150 meters of the target area, concealed in vegetation that provided perfect camouflage for her specialized suit. For 3 days, Sao observed the American training operations while remaining undetected, despite intensive security patrols that passed within meters of her position. She studied the routines and behavioral patterns of her targets, identifying the optimal time and position for elimination shots. Her first target was Captain Robert Hayes,
the senior advisor who was considered one of the most effective counter-sniper instructors in the American military. Hayes had trained multiple South Vietnamese units in techniques that had significantly reduced the effectiveness of Viet Cong snipers throughout the region. Sao's shot came at 0847 hours. On August 15, when Hayes emerged from a briefing bunker to inspect training exercises, the range was 180 meters, with a clear line of sight, but difficult shooting conditions due to heat shimmer and wind variation. The bullet struck Hayes in the center of his chest, killing him instantly. The shot was so unexpected that it took nearly 30 seconds for other personnel to realize that Hayes had been shot rather than suffering a medical emergency. The response was immediate and massive. American and South Vietnamese forces launched an intensive search of the area, using tracker dogs, aerial reconnaissance and systematic grid searches to locate the sniper. But Sao remained in her concealed position for 18 hours, while searchers passed repeatedly through her location without detecting her presence. When she finally moved to extract from the area, Sao passed through 2 security perimeters and crossed an open area that was under direct observation without being spotted. Her ghillie suit had made her effectively invisible to all detection methods, except direct physical contact. Chapter 5. The innovation spreads. Word of Sao's revolutionary camouflage techniques spread rapidly through the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese military. Senior commanders recognized that her innovations could provide decisive tactical advantages if they could be replicated and distributed to other units. But reproducing Sao's ghillie suits proved to be extraordinarily difficult. The traditional textile techniques required years of training to master, and many of the materials Sao used were rare plants and minerals that were available only in specific locations. More challenging was the fact that Sao's camouflage was not a simple pattern that could be mass-produced. Each suit had to be custom created for the specific environment where it would be used, and the weaving techniques required constant adjustment based on seasonal changes and local vegetation variation. Sao was assigned to train other snipers in her techniques, but she quickly discovered that most military personnel lacked the artistic background and patience required for traditional textile work. Creating effective jungle ghillie suits required skills that were fundamentally different from conventional military training. However, Sao was able to develop simplified versions of her techniques that could be taught to other snipers. These abbreviated methods produced camouflage that was far superior to anything previously available, even though it didn't achieve the near-perfect invisibility of Sao's masterworks. She established a training program that taught snipers how to modify standard camouflage using readily available materials and basic textile technique. Students learned to incorporate local vegetation, understand color theory for jungle environments, and create three-dimensional camouflage structures. The impact on sniper effectiveness was dramatic. Units that received training in Sao's techniques showed kill rates that were 3 times higher than conventional snipers, while suffering casualty rates that were 70% lower than units using standard camouflage. American intelligence began noticing patterns in sniper attacks that suggested enemy forces had developed significantly improved camouflage capability. Reports from surviving soldiers described being attacked by invisible enemies who seemed to materialize from vegetation and disappear without trace. Chapter 6. The American response. The effectiveness of Sao's camouflage innovations led to the development of new American tactics, specifically designed to counter improved enemy concealment. Special forces units were deployed with enhanced optical equipment, thermal imaging devices, and trained tracker teams to identify and eliminate snipers using advanced camouflage. But these countermeasures proved largely ineffective against Sao's technique. Her understanding of human visual perception and jungle ecology was so sophisticated that conventional detection methods couldn't reliably identify her positions. Thermal imaging was defeated by the living vegetation incorporated into her suits, which maintained natural temperature signature. Optical enhancement couldn't penetrate camouflage that was designed to exploit the specific weaknesses of human vision. Even tracker dogs had difficulty following scent trails that were masked by the organic materials in Sao's ghillie suit. American forces began developing new weapons and tactics based on the assumption that enemy snipers could achieve near-perfect concealment. Artillery and airstrikes were used to destroy large areas of vegetation where snipers might be hiding rather than attempting to locate specific position. Agent Orange and other defoliants were deployed partly in response to the improved enemy camouflage that made traditional counter-sniper operations ineffective. If the jungle could hide enemy snipers so effectively, the solution was to destroy the jungle itself. But even these extreme measures had limited effectiveness against Sao's techniques. She adapted her camouflage to work in defoliated environments, using different materials and patterns that matched the changed landscape. Her understanding of camouflage principles was so thorough that she could create effective concealment in almost any environment. The psychological impact on American forces was significant. Soldiers began to view the jungle itself as an enemy that could hide threats in plain sight. The knowledge that enemy snipers could achieve near-perfect invisibility created paranoia and reduced the effectiveness of patrols and operations in areas where advanced camouflage was being used. Chapter 7. The Master's Technique. Sao's most sophisticated camouflage achievement was what she called the seasonal ghost suit, a ghillie suit that could adapt to environmental changes throughout the year without requiring manual modification. The suit incorporated living moss, lichen, and small plants that were cultivated specifically for camouflage purposes. These organisms would grow and change color naturally, ensuring that the suit remained perfectly matched to its environment as seasons changed and vegetation evolved.
More remarkably, Sao developed techniques for training these living camouflage elements to respond to specific environmental conditions. Moss could be conditioned to change color more rapidly in response to light variations, while certain plants could be encouraged to grow in patterns that enhance the suit's concealment properties. The seasonal ghost suit required constant care and maintenance, essentially becoming a living ecosystem that had to be fed, watered, and managed like a garden. But the results were camouflage that was not just perfect for specific environments. It was self-adapting camouflage that improved over time. Sao's own seasonal ghost suit had been in use for over 2 years, and had become so sophisticated that it could provide effective concealment in multiple different environments. The living elements had adapted to various light conditions, seasonal changes, and vegetation types, creating camouflage that was more effective than anything that could be achieved through purely artificial means. But the most remarkable aspect of the seasonal ghost suit was its integration with Sao's own movement and behavior patterns. Extended wear had created a symbiotic relationship between Sao's and her camouflage, where her movements more immensely adapted to maximize concealment, while the suit's living elements responded to her body heat, breathing, and other biological signals. The result was camouflage that functioned as a natural extension of Sao's body, providing concealment that was so perfect, it seemed to verge on the supernatural. Chapter 8. The Legend of the Invisible Death. By 1967, Sao had achieved 34 confirmed kills using her revolutionary camouflage techniques, but more importantly, she had never been spotted by enemy forces, despite operating in areas with intensive American and South Vietnamese security. Her reputation among enemy forces had reached mythical proportions. American soldiers reported being attacked by snipers who seemed to appear from solid vegetation, take their shots, and vanish without leaving any trace of their presence. Intelligence reports described encounters with the Invisible Death, a sniper who could eliminate targets from positions that appeared to offer no concealment, who could move through secured areas without detection, and who seemed to possess supernatural abilities to remain hidden. Some American units reported casualties from sniper fire when no enemy positions could be identified even after intensive searches of the area. These incidents created rumors that the Vietnamese had developed supernatural camouflage, or were using technology that exceeded American capability. The psychological impact was amplified by the precision and selectivity of Sao's targeting. She consistently eliminated high-value targets, officers, specialists, and key personnel whose deaths would have maximum impact on unit effectiveness. Her understanding of military organization allowed her to identify and prioritize targets
that would cause the greatest disruption to enemy operations. But perhaps most disturbing to American forces was the fact that Sao's attacks seemed to come from impossible positions. She would eliminate targets from locations that had been searched and cleared, from angles that should have provided no concealment, and during conditions that should have made sniper operations impossible. These seemingly supernatural capabilities were actually the result of Sao's mastery of camouflage principles that American forces didn't understand. Her positions were invisible because they exploited perceptual blindnesses in human vision. Her timing took advantage of psychological factors that made detection less likely during certain conditions. Chapter 9: The Science of Concealment. Sao's camouflage innovations were based on sophisticated understanding of human psychology and perception that had been developed through centuries of Vietnamese artistic tradition. Her family's textile techniques incorporated principles that modern science was only beginning to discover. Her color choices were based on precise knowledge of how human color vision functions under different lighting conditions. The human eye is most sensitive to certain wavelength and has blind spots for others. Sao's dyes were formulated to exploit these perceptual limitations, creating colors that were difficult for human vision to detect even when viewed direct. The patterns in her ghillie suits used principles from traditional Vietnamese art that were designed to confuse and misdirect the observer's eye. These patterns created optical illusions that made the brain interpret artificial shapes as natural vegetation, even when viewing conditions should have revealed the deception. But Sao's greatest innovation was her understanding of motion camouflage. She realized that human vision is particularly sensitive to certain types of movement, but blind to others. Her suits were designed to encourage types of movement that wouldn't trigger human motion detection response. This knowledge allowed Sao to move while remaining effectively invisible, even under direct observation. Her movements mimicked the natural motion patterns of jungle vegetation, wildlife, and environmental factors like wind and water. To observers, these movements registered as natural phenomena rather than human activity. Sao's also understood the psychological factors that affected human perception under combat conditions. Stress, fatigue, and expectation all influenced how well soldiers could detect camouflaged threats. Her tactics took advantage of these psychological factors to reduce the likelihood of detection during vulnerable moments. Modern research into camouflage and concealment has validated many of Sao's innovations. Her techniques anticipated discoveries in perceptual psychology, color science, and human factors engineering that wouldn't be fully understood until decades later. Chapter 10: The Teacher Becomes the Target. Sao's success in training other snipers in her techniques eventually made her a high-priority target for American Special Operations Forces. Intelligence analysis had identified her as the source of significantly improved enemy sniper capabilities, making her elimination a strategic objective. A joint task force was assembled specifically to locate and eliminate the Invisible Death, combining Special Forces personnel, intelligence specialists, and technical experts in camouflage detection. The task force was equipped with advanced optical equipment, thermal imaging systems, and experimental detection technologies that were being field tested in Vietnam, but hunting Sao proved to be extraordinarily difficult. Her camouflage techniques were specifically designed to defeat the detection methods being used against her, and her understanding of enemy tactics allowed her to predict and avoid most attempts at location and elimination. The task force spent 6 months developing new tactics, specifically for hunting advanced camouflaged specialists. They studied captured examples of enemy ghillie suits, interviewed soldiers who had survived sniper attacks, and developed new equipment designed to penetrate sophisticated concealment. Most importantly, they brought in specialists who understood the textile and artistic techniques that were being used for enemy camouflage. These experts could recognize the signs and patterns that indicated advanced camouflage was being used in an area. The confrontation came in January 1968, when the task force identified Sao's position during an operation near Hue. For the first time since beginning her sniper career, Sao found herself facing opponents who understood her techniques well enough to detect and counter them. Chapter 11: The Master's Final Innovation. When Sao realized she was being hunted by specialists who understood her camouflage techniques, she responded by developing her most sophisticated concealment innovation, what she called the phantom suit. The phantom suit represented the ultimate evolution of her textile and camouflage techniques. Instead of simply creating visual camouflage, the suit was designed to create a complete sensory illusion that would defeat all forms of detection. The suit incorporated sound-dampening materials that eliminated noise signatures, scent-masking substances that confused tracker dogs, and temperature-regulating elements that defeated thermal detection. Most remarkably, the suit included electromagnetic shielding that could reduce the wearer's signature on electronic detection equipment.
But the phantom suit's most innovative feature was its psychological camouflage component. Sao had realized that effective concealment required more than just hiding from enemy senses. It required manipulating enemy psychology to prevent them from looking in the right places. The suit included elements designed to misdirect attention and create false impressions about the wearer's location. Reflective elements created visual decoys that drew attention away from the actual position, while sound-generating devices created auditory diversions that confused enemy attempts at location. Most sophisticatedly, the suit was designed to exploit human pattern recognition systems. The visual patterns created false impressions that made observers believe they had already searched and cleared areas where Sao was actually concealed. The phantom suit took Sao 6 months to complete, and represented the culmination of 20 years of study in traditional Vietnamese textile arts combined with 3 years of intensive innovation for military applications. Chapter 12. The Final Hunt. The confrontation between Sao and the American Specialist Task Force lasted for 3 weeks in the jungle near Hue. It became a deadly game of hide and seek between the world's most advanced camouflage specialist and opponents who understood her techniques better than any previous enemy. Sao's phantom suit allowed her to remain undetected despite intensive searches that covered every meter of her operational area. She was able to observe her hunters from concealed positions while they passed within meters of her location, gathering intelligence about their capabilities and tactics. But the task force had learned from studying her previous operations and had developed innovative detection techniques specifically designed to counter her camouflage innovations. They used systematic search patterns that eliminated hiding places through mathematical precision rather than visual detection. More importantly, they had brought specialists who understood the artistic and cultural traditions that informed Sao's camouflage technique. These experts could recognize the patterns and principles that Sao was using even when they couldn't see the camouflage directly. The final engagement came when Sao attempted to eliminate the task force leader, Major David Chen, who had been specifically trained in advanced camouflage detection. Chen had anticipated this attempt and had positioned himself as bait in a carefully prepared trap. Sao's shot from 300 meters was technically perfect and would have eliminated any conventional target, but Chen was wearing experimental body armor that had been designed specifically to defeat sniper attacks, and his position had been chosen to minimize exposure while maximizing the chance of locating return fire. When Sao's position was revealed by her muzzle flash, the task force responded with precisely coordinated fire that would have eliminated any conventional sniper. But Sao's phantom suit allowed her to escape the initial barrage and begin moving to an alternate position. The pursuit that followed lasted for 6 hours as Sao used every technique she had developed to evade capture while the task force employed systematic tracking methods that gradually reduced her options for escape. The end came when Sao was cornered in an area that had been defoliated by Agent Orange, where her camouflage techniques were less effective. Despite her phantom suit, she couldn't achieve perfect concealment in an environment that lacked the complex vegetation her techniques required. Sao died fighting using her rifle until her ammunition was exhausted and then defending herself with traditional Vietnamese weapons that had been integrated into her camouflage gear. Her final position was so well concealed that her body wasn't discovered until 3 days after the engagement, despite intensive searches of the area. Epilogue. The legacy of invisibility. Vo Thi Sao's innovations in military camouflage outlived their creator and continue to influence special operations forces around the world. Her techniques for creating jungle-specific ghillie suits were adopted by military forces from multiple nations and became standard equipment for snipers operating in tropical environments. Modern ghillie suits used by special forces incorporate many of the principles that Sao developed using traditional Vietnamese textile technique. The integration of living vegetation, the use of natural
natural dyes and materials, and the understanding of perceptual psychology all trace their origins to Sao's wartime innovations. Military research into advanced camouflage has validated many of Sao's insights about human perception and concealment. Her understanding of color theory, motion camouflage, and psychological factors anticipated scientific discoveries that wouldn't be fully developed until decades after her death. But perhaps Sao's greatest legacy is the demonstration that traditional knowledge and artistic techniques can provide the foundation for revolutionary military innovation. Her success showed that centuries of accumulated cultural wisdom could be more valuable than advanced technology when applied with sufficient creativity and understanding. The techniques that Sao developed for counter-detection have also influenced military doctrine for hunting advanced camouflage specialists. The methods used to locate and eliminate her became the foundation for modern special operations techniques for defeating sophisticated concealment. Today, as military forces face increasingly sophisticated camouflage and concealment techniques, Sao's innovations remain relevant and influential. Her understanding that effective camouflage requires integration of multiple disciplines, art, science, psychology, and culture, continues to inform research into advanced concealment technology. The Silent Sister proved that the most advanced military technology could be defeated by traditional knowledge applied with innovative thinking. Her legacy reminds us that in warfare, as in art, the most powerful innovations often come from unexpected combinations of old wisdom and new applications. Sao's 89 confirmed kills were achieved through perfect integration of artistic vision, scientific understanding, and warrior spirit. She remains the only sniper in history who achieved near-perfect invisibility through purely technical means, without relying on electronic or mechanical enhancement. Her ghost still walks the jungles of Vietnam, invisible and eternal, a reminder that true mastery transcends technology and that the deepest innovations emerge from the marriage of tradition and necessity. In the end, Vo Thi Sao didn't just master the art of war. She transformed it through the ancient wisdom of her ancestors and the desperate innovation of her own genius. She became invisible not through magic but through perfect understanding of the science of perception and the art of deception. And in that invisibility, she achieved a form of immortality that continues to influence military thinking decades after her death. The Silent Sister taught the world that true camouflage isn't about hiding from your enemies. It's about making them unable to see you even when they're looking directly at you.